Hey, I'm Terence Moore, and guess what? I am chopping it up with Buck.
So it's crazy how you bump into people when you see them. I'm at the Miami of Ohio Toledo game this weekend. I run into Terence Moore. I've seen him on TV. We know each other, but we don't know each other. And I did not realize he went to Miami of Ohio. I knew he was a longtime journalist with the Atlanta Constitution and so many other newspapers, and still writes for Forbes, contributes everywhere, and he has a book. So we were talking at halftime, and I said, I got to get him on. So great to have you on Chopping It Up with Buck. So good to see you last weekend, but also now getting you on the show. How you doing, Terence?
I'm doing quite well. And Charles, I was so pleased that you found your way to the real Miami, as opposed to the hideous one down in Florida. Yeah, when I went to Miami in the 70s, in 74 to 78, we used to have these T-shirts that would say that we were a university when Florida was a swamp.
Oh,
and that's true.
What made you go to Miami of Ohio? I mean, it's interesting how you got there, but tell us a little bit about that. I know you were a really good athlete growing up. What made you decide on Miami of Ohio?
Well, I'll give you the short version. My dad was an AT&T supervisor. Matter of fact, he was the first Black supervisor in the history of AT&T back in the early 60s. So he used to get transferred around the Midwest an awful lot. So I was born and raised in South Bend, Indiana, a little university there, University of Notre Dame, by the way. Matter of fact, a little side note, I was born in the same hospital that George Gipp died in, okay?
Wow.
That's one of my claims of fame. So, but in 68, we moved to Cincinnati. Later on, we moved to Chicago in 71, Milwaukee in 72. I went to 3 different high schools in 3 different states in 3 different years. But when we moved to Cincinnati in 1968, and I grew up in a family where we went everywhere, all the sporting events, in South Bend, needless to say, Notre Dame games. Cincinnati, we were there at the start of the Big Red Machine in 68. This new NFL team came about named the Cincinnati Bengals, okay? The Cincinnati Royals were still playing. And Charles, you remember the Cincinnati Royals, right?
Oh, yeah. No, I don't remember, but I heard about them.
Oscar Robertson, he was in that heyday. Yeah. And so, we had done everything. So one day my dad said, hey, do you guys want to go see a high school basketball tournament? Of course, yeah, it's sports. Why not? And so we started driving up this narrow highway, going north from Cincinnati for 37 miles through cornfields and the hogs and pigs. I'm 12 years old, and he was like, what the heck where are we going? And my dad said, we're going to this new building called Millett Hall. It's on this campus, this college campus. And of course, it's Miami of Ohio. And I remember 12 years old, when we pulled into Oxford, Ohio, it was like the Wizard of Oz. You know how it goes from black to color? It was like that. And all of a sudden, you're in the middle of nowhere, and it's like, oh my God. And something just told me right then and there, this is where I need to go to school. And that's how it all came about, roughly speaking.
Well, it's interesting. People that have never been to Oxford don't quite know, but I tell everybody, I said, it's one of the, when you're driving there, you don't really know what to expect. I called a lot of Mid-American Conference games back when I first started calling college football. And that was always one of the prettiest places. Even this past weekend when I took pictures and you can see the leaves on the trees, it's just a really picturesque university. And I can see why people fall in love with it when they go down there.
Oh, yeah. And, and think about this now. Back in the 1950s, Robert Frost, a Pulitzer Prize winning poet, said for eternity, he said, Miami, Ohio, the prettiest campus ever there was. Okay. So there's that. And then there's all this other stuff, which is what I wrote about in the book, all these famous coaches that came out of Miami University, famous people in general. It's like one of these, it's like a magic place, just some of the, and I'm sure we'll get into this, but give you an example. The person who invented Gumby went to Miami, Ohio. The first CIA director went to Miami, Ohio. The last president with a beard went to Miami, Ohio. Benjamin Harrison. Hey, Charles, I know you remember Benjamin Harrison. And then here's my favorite one of all, Ginger from Gilligan's Island.
Did she
went
go to
Miami,
Miami?
Ohio.
Oh,
That's
wow.
right.
I did not know that. Well, the funny thing is you went to Miami of Ohio as an economics major, but most people know you for your
That's
prose
exactly right.
and your ability to write. So why economics? What were your thoughts as you were looking at, that or journalism?
Well, that's a good question. I'll answer that in two ways. One, Miami is one of those schools that kind of teaches the whole person. And there's so many people who may major in something but end up in another field. But there was partly that. But the other part was when I was in senior in high school, and this was actually a junior in high school back in Milwaukee. And I'm wrong on that. I was a sophomore in high school in Milwaukee. And at that time, I thought I was going to be the next center fielder for the Big Red Machine. I was a diehard Big Red Machine fan. And I played center field. I was a pretty good center fielder. And I was also a pretty good football player also. So either football, baseball. So my sophomore year, I'm sitting there in English class, and my English teacher brought in the sports editor of the Milwaukee Journal, a guy by the name of Bill Dwyer. And he started talking about sports writing. And I said, that's what I want to do. And so I went to Mrs. Griesbach, who was my English teacher. And she said, well, the first thing you need to do is join a high school newspaper. I had no idea we had a high school newspaper. So I joined the high school newspaper, became the editor of the paper. I was the first Black writer in history of the high school newspaper, first Black editor. There's a little theme here, Charles, that you're going to see. And so then when it became time to go to college, I always had this Miami, Ohio in the back of my head. And I should say this, being a spiritual person, I always think there's no such thing as a coincidence. And my story is the epitome of that. And so Miami was always in the back of my head because 12 years old, seeing the beautiful campus. So now it's time to go to college. And Mrs. Griesbach, along with Bill Dwyer, the sports editor of Milwaukee Journal, to go to a college where you can do a lot of writing. So I thought, well, maybe Marquette right there in Milwaukee, Notre Dame, grew up in South Bend, but I started thinking about all the relatives in South Bend, and so I won't be able to get any work done there. And so I had this brochure from Miami, Ohio, and in the back of the brochure, it said, home of the Miami Student, the oldest college newspaper west of the Alleghenies. So I called down and I asked the question. I said, how much writing can you do as a freshman? They said, we allow freshmen to write, which was highly unusual back then. So it was like God was telling me to go to Miami, Ohio for all these reasons. So right before I got ready to go, the last bit of advice I got from Bill Dwyer, from a high school teacher back then, and remember, this is 1974, right in the middle of Watergate, and Woodward and Bernstein and Washington Post. Everybody wanted to be a journalist. They all said, go there, write a lot, but major in something else. That's one of the greatest pieces of advice I ever had. So I majored in econ, and I joined the college newspaper from day one, started writing more, and it just went from there.
That's amazing that, when you talk about how you got there and what it took to get there, how many of you were there when you were at Miami of Ohio? Black, not just writers, but Black students. How many Black students were at Miami of Ohio at the time?
When I graduated from Miami, Ohio, which is, again, is a predominantly white college, when I graduated on May 7th, 1978, there were exactly 121 Blacks on campus.
Wow.
And again, this is the story of my life. And I detailed this in another book I wrote last year called The Real Hank Aaron. I was closer to Hank Aaron than any other reporter. And we had a 45-year friendship, Hank and I. And this book is 95% fresh stuff about Hank Aaron. There's stuff that nobody has ever known before. And one reason that Hank and I were so close, he used to tell me, he said, I was the only reporter who ever understood him. And that's because of my background. Because I grew up in a family of Jackie Robinsons, like my dad, first Black supervisor in history AT&T. He and his best friend, Fred Ware, integrated the golf courses in Indiana in the 1950s.
I remember he was Fred Ware's name. That's crazy.
Prolific bowler. He won the 1963 singles champion. He was 1963 singles champion in South Bend. First Black person ever to do that. My mom, she was the first Black employee for Associates, the Savings and Loans Company, which was founded in South Bend, and later became the only Black supervisor for the Federal Reserve in Milwaukee. My brother Daryl was the first black baseball player in the history of the University of Wisconsin, 1977. So then you get to me. And like I told you, I was first black from my high school newspaper. We won awards all the time.
Yeah.
I was the first black writer in the history of the Miami student newspaper, oldest college newspaper west of the Alleghenies. First editor of any kind when I became a sports editor. Then I got an internship at the Cincinnati Enquirer the summer of my junior year. So I was the first black intern in the history of the Cincinnati Enquirer. Became the first black sports writer in the history of the Cincinnati Enquirer. Was hired on May 7th, 1978, and only the second black writer in the history of the paper. Then I went to the San Francisco Examiner, and there I covered the Oakland Raiders and the San Francisco Giants. First black sports writer in the history of the San Francisco Examiner. First black writer ever to cover a National Football League team on a regular basis for a major newspaper when I covered the Oakland Raiders. And then I'm also the longest running black person ever to vote for Baseball Hall of Famers, and only the second one ever allowed to do so. So I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And these experiences, they're good in a way, but Charles, you can relate to this. You know, when you're the first and the only, in a lot of situations, there's a whole lot of bad, particularly when I came to Atlanta as a black sports columnist where I was giving my opinion. And a lot of that's in that book, the Hank Aaron book. It was brutal.
Well, I'm gonna download the Hank Aaron book, and I've known Dusty.
I'll send
Baker
you a copy. I'm gonna send you a copy.
I've known Dusty for years. So, and Dusty was on
my book, by the way.
Yeah, I know. I looked when I was doing research. I looked. Dusty retired today, or they're saying he's going to potentially retire tomorrow, which is, I'm happy for him. But he was on deck with Hank Aaron. I hate that I didn't ever get to meet the great Hank Aaron. I was a baseball player growing up. My son did a project at Emory on Hank Aaron. But we did not get. I didn't get the opportunity. The one time that we were all in the same place, something just happened where it didn't work out. And I don't know if Hank wasn't feeling well that day, but when you think about the legacy and what he left for all of the black players, and I call the Latino guys black players because they're our skin color. They may not think that, but I'm going to say that. But the things that I know.
Yeah, right.
I know. Yeah, I know. But what I just think the history, what Dusty talks about, I can tell what Hank imparted on him and Ralph Garr.
Right.
So that's how I met Dusty, through Ralph Garr and Ruby Garr. So I'm always amazed to hear the stories of the man. There's so much that people think they know, but you have the chance to be right there all the time and understand. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I'll tell you what, Charles, I can't tell you how many times I'm getting chills just thinking about this. And this is one of the greatest compliments you can get as a reporter. I'm also a journalism professor. I'm a visiting professor. I taught here in Ohio, at Miami, Ohio, for 7 years, and now I'm teaching at Georgia State, so I can be closer to Atlanta to write books, I guess.
Yeah.
And but one of the things that gives me great pride, and I hear it with the Red Brick Magic book, and I heard it with Hank Aaron book, people who know or people who think they know something about a subject or an individual. I've had so many people who are close to Hank Aaron come to me and say that book was amazing. I didn't know this. I didn't know that. I didn't know whatever. I mean, all kinds of people, because Hank shared things with me he never started to share with anybody else.
How'd you get him? How did you get him to open up? Because I understand why he was the way he was. I mean, and that was his nature, right? You were around him. How did you get him to open up and share the things that did?
It really goes back to what I said in the beginning, was he really saw that I understood him because of the things that I went through. And a lot of the battles, and again, one of the things that's fresh in this book, and there's a whole lot of stuff, people always think about the Babe Ruth chase, about how bad that was. Well, they don't know half of it. I got stuff in the book that has never been said before. And let me start from the beginning of this. This is the summer of 2020, and Hank and I are talking, and Hank, I was telling Hank, I said, Hank, I read every book written about you. I've seen every documentary, and I said that all of that together still doesn't touch anywhere near the essence of Hank Aaron. That's unbelievable that is. He says, you're right. He says, you know way more about me than anybody else. Then he said, we need to do a book together. And I said, yes, we do. So this is the summer of 2020. And just jump ahead, Hank died in January of 2021. So keep that in mind. So this is the summer of 2020. And so we're all prepared to do this book. And it's about a few weeks later, Hank calls me up, and this is the saddest I've ever heard Hank. He says, I think you need to talk to my lawyer. Okay. I said, oh, okay. About what? He said, just speak to him. And so his lawyer calls me up and he says, and the lawyer's just all brokenhearted. He said, I'm sorry, Hank told me that you want to write this book, but you can't really do it with the blessings of Hank or his family or whatever, because he said that the year before, I guess the lawyer had made this handshake agreement with another author to do this book. And I'm trying to think of this guy's name. He's famous for doing presidential biographies. I'll think of his name in a minute. And he said that, since we made that agreement, he says that we can't really have you doing an official book with Hank. And then he paused over the phone. I'm thinking, God, this is terrible. He says, but this does not preclude you from doing the book. He said, I'm just telling you, you still can do a book. I'm just saying that we can't officially, do it as far as like a Hank Aaron, blah, blah, blah. So he was just telling me to go ahead and write the book, which I ended up doing. And lo and behold, unfortunately, Hank dies a couple of months later. But there's two things I had that was going for me in regards to that book. Number one, the personal experiences I had with Hank that nobody else knew about. And I was omniscient. Back in the early 1990s, let me go backwards. Most of us as reporters, particularly print reporters, we had this habit when we do these interviews. It's sort of like you finish with the interview, you delete, and just go on to the next interview, okay, on your tape, or just throw it away, what have you. But it was somewhere in the early 1990s. I was listening to an interview I had with Hank, and I was like, why am I deleting these tapes with Hank? This is Hank Aaron. I started saving these tapes. So I had all of these tape recordings that I've done with Hank from the early 1990s. So I was able to use a lot of that stuff. And I found myself going back, hearing stuff that I missed the first time around. And it was just incredible. So, but it's a long-winded way to say that Hank understood that I got him because of my experiences. And one of the biggest things was this. For me at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, I was the first Black sports columnist in the history of the Deep South, meaning that I was the first Black sports writer allowed to give his opinion. And I was catching absolute hell, not only outside the paper, but inside the paper. And the stories will make your skin crawl. And one of the persons in the depth of this was Hank Aaron. And at the same time, this is a part of the book that nobody knew about with Hank. Hank was also the second Black executive in the history of Major League Baseball, second only to his brother-in-law, who died tragically about 2 months after he was on the job, maybe a little bit short of a year. But anyway, the part that I detail in the book was how, at the same time I was catching hell at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Hank Aaron, as an executive for the Braves, was catching it also outside the Braves and inside the Braves. And the stories will shock you of what he had to go through as an executive with the Braves, a Black executive in baseball.
Yeah, a guy that was the home run king and who went through all the things he had to go through. And I tell people all the time, they don't realize his mom was hugging him. And I know you know this story, but she was, her dad, his mom and dad were there just hugging him because they thought something could happen that night he did hit 715. It's funny. That was the night I wrote down in my Bible that I wanted to play professional sports. I didn't know what I wanted to play, but I found that Bible a few years ago, and my dad said, if you have goals, write them down. It was deep. And every time I think of that, now meeting Dusty Baker and Norman Ralsgar, and I don't know Hank Aaron, but I feel like I know him through so many other people. So,
yeah, particularly through like Dusty. And Dusty, like I said, Dusty did the foreword of my book. Dusty and I go back 45 years. I mean, I go back when Dusty was a player for the Dodgers.
And I hated him when he played with the Dodgers because I was an Astros fan.
Well, and I'm a Reds fan. I'm a Big Red Machine
fan. The Big Red Machine. Yeah.
Right. But I can reveal this now. But Dusty told me back in April that he was going to retire, and they just kind of swore me to secrecy. So so he knew this was going to be his last year, and it was just.
Terrence, it's funny. I saw him before the season, and he didn't really say. But you could just tell he was much more relaxed and the things that he was doing, and he wanted to be out hunting and fishing. I wasn't totally shocked that this was his last year. If he had said I came back another year, then I would have been like, oh, well, you know, but I did. And you're right. He will tell his inner circle certain things, or you can just kind of get a sense.
Yes.
But a great run by a great man. We're going to take a short break with Terence Moore on the Chopping It Up with Buck show. We'll be right back.
Join us each week and a new celebrity guest on Chopping It Up with Buck. Brought to you by Thin Energy, thinenergy.com.
So I'm on right now with the legendary Terence Moore. And, you know, Terence, I appreciate the book, Red Bricks. I don't know if you can see it, Red Brick Magic. I appreciate you giving me a copy of it. Now I got to get the Hank Aaron book because during the football season, it's hard for me to read, but I always bring a few books with me, and then I throw a few on the Kindle so I can just keep reading. I'm actually reading the Lewis and Clark book, and I'm almost finished. I was just intrigued. I was intrigued by how these two men took a group of folks and came back. But I think the part that I like about Stephen Ambrose's book, it is gives Sacagawea a lot of credit. And it also has some mention of York, the only Black person on their journey, the core discoveries. They didn't get anything when they got back, though. Those two, everybody else did. So,
of course, I mean, we know how that works.
I say that to say you mentioned it when you were at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. You took a lot of heat because you kind of tell it like it is, and I don't know if people always like that. Tell me how it is to be out in front when you're writing and when you're giving your opinion and you're just saying these are what I and you usually do it on facts. But like the article I just read a couple of days ago on Forbes, I was a little bit late to read it about the Red Tails. It was funny that you said the Commanders should be the Red Tails, and I'm thinking, yeah, that makes perfect sense. They've had so many problems that they can make this a really good story for them. So how do you stay in front of the curve on things like that?
Well, see, now, first of all, one of the things I always tell my students, and I teach white and Black students and, all together. But my thing is from a pure columnist standpoint or commentator standpoint, you got to say something. Okay. But in every class I have, I always point to somebody in my class to come up to put the two magic words on the board. And the two magic words are startle me. Not sensationalize me, startle me.
Not hot take me, not hot take me, but startle me. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So you're catching on where I'm going, Charles. Okay. and what people don't understand, and I'm talking about young writers, and some old writers too, and certainly readers out there, fans, that we are in a world now, unfortunately, this microwave world of quick hits and what have you, and quick takes, and certain individuals, that just roll out of bed and pontificate off the top of their head. Anybody can do that. Now, that's why I was so glad what you said before about when I give an opinion, whether it's a written opinion or a verbal opinion, I'm backing it up. Okay. You got to have an opinion, yes, but why are you saying that? And what I love is when I meet people in the street, which is all the time, and I'm the Antichrist in many circles in Atlanta, when it comes to sports, and they'll come to me and say, "Oh, you're always talking bad about the Falcons," for instance. Then I'll listen to them and let them get out of their system. I said, okay, how many winning seasons have the Falcons had the last 5 years? None? Okay. When's the last time they've been above 500 prior to 2000? So what are you talking about, man? And I don't do it like that, but I just do it more.
I know, yeah.
But what it comes down to, my philosophy has always been, and this is the old school in me. When I was growing up, I was able to learn from these old timers who taught good fundamentals of journalism. Okay, and even when it comes to commentary, you give your opinion, but you give a fair assessment as far as the fact. And the other thing is, you don't hide. Okay. We have too many hit and run artists out there. What I mean is guys that'll say something tough, and then you particularly if you're a local guy, and they won't see you for like forever. If I'm writing something tough about somebody for the Falcons or the Braves or the Hawks, where I'm based in Atlanta, I might even call somebody up and say, listen, I just want to warn you that this is coming, and I'm going to give you a chance to respond, even though it's my opinion. I don't have to do that. Okay. And we see that all the time now for your former employers, current, I guess, in the ESPN. I mean, a lot of guys on there. I mean, they're just talking off the top of their heads. Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody's got an opinion, and then they got this formula. By the way, I'm not naming any names, and the formula is to say something outrageous and throw in one of two acceptable swear words. When I say acceptable, they're still swear words, but one starts with a D and one starts with an H. Okay, just throw that in there, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, that's so brilliant. And I'm like, the guy didn't say anything. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah. No, I think you bring up some really valid points. I was speaking with Terence Moore. Red Brick Magic is his most recent book, and also a book on the great Hank Aaron as well. I know you have many more coming. What is it about college football right now, if we're gonna be real? I mean, you had a great article, I thought, in Forbes on Georgia and Northwestern, Kirby and Pat Fitzgerald, and I am sure Bulldog Nation did not like that. I am sure. But what I say to that is, you hit the nail on the head. Coaches are allowed to, if they have wins, it masks a lot of things. I've been involved in programs like that, and I know from experience, you have been around them. How have we allowed the college football programs not to become the front porch,
right?
But they are the whole meal deal now on all not just Georgia, but just all over the country.
Charles, let's be fair, okay?
Mm-hmm.
This has always been the case. I mean, this has always been the case, not just recent, okay? And I'm going to give you something current, and then I'm going to go back in time here, okay?
Okay.
And touch upon somebody that's in my book. Current, Jim Harbaugh. Now, how long would Jim Harbaugh be at the University of Michigan with all the stuff that's been going on the last couple of 2 or 3 years?
They got tickets on them. They have tickets on
exactly.
them.
Exactly.
And paper trail.
And the way he responds, I mean, it's like, this guy was going like in 2 minutes. But you know what? All of a sudden, he can beat Ohio State, so all is fair and all is well. Now, along those same lines, let's go with Ohio State. And Charles, you remember this. This is one of the guys from Miami, Ohio. Got to start at Miami, Ohio. Woody Hayes.
Oh, yeah.
Woody Hayes, the winningest coach in the history of Ohio State. Woody Hayes, 5 national championships, okay? Woody Hayes was the man. But you know what else? Woody Hayes was also a pain in the butt. I mean, he was a guy that was he was nasty. He would like during games, he would, if he was upset with a call, he would break yard markers. I mean, he would shove reporters and photographers.
He was Bob Knight before Bob Knight, basically.
He was. I mean, he was
in the same sense. Yeah.
Yeah, just a mean, nasty guy. Matter of fact, what got him fired was supposedly. Now, watch me now. I want people to listen real close to what I'm going to say. What got him fired supposedly was in December 1978. Ohio State's playing the Gator Bowl against Clemson, and a Clemson player intercepts the ball near the Ohio State sidelines, and Woody slugged the kid and tries to slug him again. As a matter of fact, attacks an official, so he's fired the next day. And by the way, Charles, here's the rest of the story, which is in the book. Woody Hayes vanished for 6 months. Didn't talk to any reporter. Guess who was the first reporter to talk to Woody Hayes after that incident? I got my hand raised. It was me. I was the first person to talk to Woody Hayes.
Wow.
And it's in the book.
What did you get it through your mind? Okay.
You got through the Miami Ohio
more and more.
One of this book is about this is that, again, it's not a coincidence. When people found out I was from Miami, Ohio, I got people to talk that normally didn't talk, and it's all throughout the book. The Woody Hayes, the Paul Browns, I mean, the Walter Austins, and we talk more about that. But we're getting back to what I'm saying, and I stress again, Woody Hayes supposedly was fired in December 1978 because he slugged the Clemson kid on the side. That's not why Woody Hayes was fired. Okay,
why was he fired?
He was fired because altogether now he couldn't beat Michigan anymore. That was it.
Point. Yeah.
If Woody Hayes would have, he had lost 2 or 3 straight games to Bo Schembechler. And and for those of you who don't understand, I mean, Ohio State and Michigan. I mean, you talk about the hatred there.
I know.
I mean, so I mean, you got to beat Michigan. So as soon as Woody couldn't beat Michigan anymore, like they're looking for anything to say, and that's why I say the Jim Harbaugh thing. So in other words, I submit that this has always been the case in the history of college football.
Yeah, I want to ask you about a couple of guys that a lot of people may not know, and I got a chance to spend time with both of them through my Miami of Ohio MAC days, Randy Walker and Terry Hepner. I thought 2 really, really good guys that are gone way too early. Randy had a really nice program at Miami of Ohio. Then he ended up going to Northwestern. Terry Hepner was there after during the Ben Roethlisberger era.
Exactly.
And just what are your thoughts on those 2 guys? Because they were really good quality coaches, but also I thought good people just from my interactions with them.
Well, let's start with Randy Walker. Randy Walker, I got a whole chapter in my book called The Hepburn Hilton. And it's talking about Hepburn Hall. And guess what? The Hepburn Hall, my hand raised, I wasn't Hepburn Hall. Until proven otherwise, I was part of the greatest dorm in the history of mankind. And people laugh when I say that, but when I started rattling off the people who were in my dorm and we all knew each other, it's like, wow, you got a good point. One of them was Randy Walker. And you're exactly right. Randy Walker did a great job when he was at our school, Miami, Ohio. He knocked off a couple of top 10 ranked teams. Yeah. And then he goes to Northwestern and does a great job at Northwestern. As a matter of fact, the greatest Northwestern coach at that point, and the one before him was a guy named Ara Parsegian, who everybody knows famous at Notre Dame, but he also was prolific at Northwestern. But here's the rest of the Randy Walker story. Besides the fact he lived right down the hall from me in Hepburn Hall, Randy Walker was also part of the greatest mid-major football team ever. Now, I know somebody out there saying that, well, what about Boise State? Well, no, it was Miami, Ohio. When I was in school in the 70s, when I was at Miami in the 70s, we went 32-1-1. The one loss, and by the way, Randy Walker played on these teams. He was a running back. We went 32-1-1. The one loss was by 1 point at Michigan State. The tie was 10-10 at Purdue. And actually, we were 34-0 because there was no instant replay back then. The 1 point loss at Michigan State, we hit a game-winning field goal that even people at Michigan State said was good. One official said it wasn't, and there was no replay to replay it. So we actually won the game. And then at Purdue, and Charles, you're like this. We scored the game-winning touchdown at Purdue, and an official calls pass interference on an offensive lineman. Let that sink in. Took away the touchdown. Anyway, I digress. So we really were 34-0. So Randy Walker was part of the team. And the reason I say that those Miami teams were greater than any other mid-major, 3 straight years in bowl games, we beat Florida, Georgia, South Carolina. None of the games were close. Finished 15th, 10th, 12th in the final AP poll. And here's the thing, Charles. Back then, there were no scholarship limits. So you got little Miami of Ohio playing these big powerhouse teams, whereas Boise State and the teams now, you got, the 85 scholarship limits here. So it's a whole different ballgame. But Randy Walker was a big part of that back then.
It was interesting, too, and I knew he had his background in football, and it was always good to talk to him. But the thing is, I don't think people realize either, there was only one team from the MAC that was going to go to a bowl game.
Yes.
And they had to be almost undefeated or really – one loss against maybe one of the bigger schools. It's not like it is now where you may have 3, 4, 5 teams from the MAC going to any kind of bowl game.
Yeah.
And there weren't as many bowls. The ones you just rattled off were big bowl games.
Well, now think about this, Charles. Okay, and I'm going to keep on this Hepburn Hilton. By the way, we call it the Hepburn Hilton because we just look at it as a classy dorm. It actually is Hepburn Hall. But, okay, I'm going to tell you who else was in that dorm. Okay, I'm just going to deal with the coaches first of all. Okay, Randy Walker was there. Okay, have you heard of a guy named Ron Zook?
Yes, I have.
Ron Zook took the place of Steve Spurrier at Florida. Ron Zook later went on to coach at Illinois. Ron Zook became an NFL coach. Okay, great guy, great coach. Ron Zook was a defensive back for those great Miami teams, 32-1-1. Another player for that team. And this, to me, is one of my all-time favorite guys, Sherman Smith. Sherman Smith, wow. I devote virtually an entire chapter to Sherman Smith. I was always in awe of Sherman Smith as a student, and I'm still in awe of Sherman Smith. And let me tell you who Sherman Smith was and is. Sherman Smith was the quarterback of that team that went 32-1-1. What makes that rather remarkable, Sherman Smith was or is African American. And as you know, back in the 1970s, you got on one hand the number of starting black quarterbacks and major college football back then. Sherman Smith was one of them, and he took that team to 32-1-1. Okay. The other thing, Sherman Smith later on becomes a pretty darn good coach. Coached in high school, coached in college, and then spent the last 20-something years coaching in the NFL. He was the assistant head coach for the Tennessee Titans when they went to the Super Bowl, the only time they went to the Super Bowl. He was the right-hand man in Seattle for Pete Carroll for 10, 15 years. For a number of years. They went to 2 Super Bowls, won a Super Bowl. And again, another guy that was in my dorm. Some other guys in my dorm. Danny Hall, good friend of mine in Atlanta. Danny Hall is a baseball coach at Georgia Tech for the last 30 years. Danny Hall is the winningest active baseball coach in the country. Hepburn Hall, okay? Billy Dorn. Now you're a Houston guy. You know about Billy Dorn, right?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Second baseman.
All those guys. Yeah, all those guys were right.
Just this year, Charles, Bill Dorn just this year was elected to the Houston Astros Hall of Fame. And that's just for starters.
That's just crazy. Well, it's incredible when you look at the cradle of coaches, but all of the folks that have come through Miami. And really not just Miami, but there's some other schools in the MAC that you look, when you start looking at them and you're saying, man, look at all the other folks that have come in the tradition that they've had. But that's why I was so intrigued to get you on to kind of talk about that. What are you working on now? I know you're selling Red Brick Magic, but a writer always is working on another book, even when they're promoting another one. What's your next? What are you doing now?
And it's interesting you asked that, Charles, because what I got coming up next is usually one of my favorite words friends say that I use quite a bit. It's huge. It's huge, and it's in a different vein of the Hank Aaron book and the Red Brick Magic book. I'm not at liberty to say right now because we're still kind of going through some early stages type of things, but it's very significant. And again, I practice what I preach. One of the things I really enjoy is that my students, and I've got a lot of students and mentees, the ones that have read my books, they always say that you write like you teach. So I practice what I preach. So to startle me is all the way through. I don't write the obvious, okay? Whether even for my Forbes.com columns or when I'm on television, I give you something different. And so when I say that this is huge, it's rather huge. And you got
to come on Chopping It Up with Buck when you're getting ready to
I would definitely.
Yeah, we got to be the first ones to startle people with that. Well, well, Terrence, we're gonna get you out with this, Mr. Moore. We usually do a thing called the 2-minute drill. And we saw the 2-minute drill where your guys got hurt. Oh, I was so.
Oh, geez.
Oh man,
that was rough.
He was playing so well. I know he's gonna be fine, but it's just that hurts you guys. A young quarterback. I hope he gets back healthy and well. But we usually do a 2-minute drill, and we're gonna you're not gonna not get down the field like Miami. You're gonna get a chance to score. We always do. Whenever you come on here, we give you the opportunity. So I got to ask you, what is your music of choice? What's in the Apple Music, Spotify? What are you listening to?
You want to know something? I'm visiting my mom. I get this from my mom, and I know people say this, but I'm really a person that likes all genre of music. You would be shocked what I've got on my iPhone. And when I work out, for instance, I just hit shuffle. So it varies. I mean, it's not like I'm avoiding the question, but I'm not, because
no.
I'll give you an example. Like, for instance, when go up to Miami, okay, I like this song by Kenny Rogers, "Celebrate Me Home." Not Kenny Rogers, Kenny Loggins. Excuse me, Kenny Loggins. Please celebrate me home, because it reminds me of when I'm at Miami University. Okay, I like from a hip hop standpoint. I like the old. I like the medium old hip hop, like the Bling Bling. Remember that by what do you call it? The New Orleans group. You know,
All the
I like.
guys out of New Orleans.
Yeah, I like that type of thing. Lil Wayne when he was like first starting. I like
Juvenile, Lil Wayne,
Juvenile,
all
those guys.
Yeah, I got
Frank
you.
Sinatra. Actually, my guy is Tony Bennett.
Yeah,
Tony Bennett was the man. I mean, I listen to Tony Bennett all the time. And then I like stuff. I'm also a connoisseur of fight songs. I mean, I can just listen to a great fight song or songs, plural, all day long, and
really?
they're not all created equal. So it spans the gamut.
That's awesome. Well, you're marching down the field, making sure we're getting those. You got timeouts left, so use them wisely. Time management is key on here. Red wine or white wine? Which one are you a drinker of, connoisseur of?
It would be neither, because I'm a non-drinker. So
all right.
That's an easy one.
Well, do you like? So when you go on the place, do you like it sparkling or tap? Just not sparkling.
I'm just a plain old South Indiana guy, Notre Dame basic football. I want it simple. Just give me simple water.
Steak or chicken?
Definitely chicken.
Okay. It's funny. The more I ask people that, I don't eat as much red meat, and I think more and more people stop eating. Did you ever eat steak at all?
Let me put it this way. I turned 68 in the next week or so. The last time I had any kind of McDonald's anything, I was 28 or 29.
Wow. So that's why that marches you down the field just alone.
and reason, Charles, I've always not wanted to. I've always been a very active person, and I always didn't want to do things that will weigh me down. So it wasn't one of those type of things saying that I can't do this because of health. Because I just found that just slowed me down. I got things to do. I can't be doing this stuff.
What was out of the books? What was the hardest one to finish? Because everybody talks about getting through and they're writing it, but to finish it and put it to the world, which one out of the two books that you've written were the hardest one?
And I hate to say this because it's going to come off sounding the wrong way, but neither one. And the publishers were just amazed at how fast I was able to write both of these books. And the reason that both books were so easy for me personally to write was because I was just so invested in them. It was like Hank Aaron.
Yeah.
Hank Aaron was my guy. And I just knew. And then Red Brick Magic, hey, my Ohio Magical School, and the third book, which I'll come on to tell you about, is very similar. Where I can get it. And I got to just say real quick about this. So I write the Hank Aaron book, and I got it done in about just pretty much 9-10 months, which is pretty fast to do a book. And so I was 21, and it was published in 22, in the spring of 22. So it's like the fall of 22. It's August of 2022, and the editor says, "This book is doing so well." Says, "Do you have a second book in mind?" And again, I practice what I preach. I always tell my mentees, always be able to say yes, to every question along these lines. You don't know whether people are going to. I said yes. And they said, "Well, what do you have in mind?" I think, oh my gosh, I got to think real quick. And I did have this Red Brick Magic, my Ohio thing floating around my head. So I just threw it out there. And then I just told them the concept and that kind of stuff. And they said, "Okay, well, we'll get back to you and see what we think." Okay, because they have a whole committee. He calls me the next day. This is like in August of 2022. Says, "That is a great idea." He says, "We want that for the fall of 2023. And I'm like Homer Simpson, like, no. You know what I mean? So I'm like, okay, I think I need to get some work done. So that just shows you how fast I was able to do it. But again, it was just the subject matter of the books just excited me so much. I was very much invested. And the other part of it is I've always been a very organized person where I do a lot of things. I mean, like I said, I do the Forbes thing. I got a TV show in Atlanta. I do every week. I do stuff for Cato, stuff for MSNBC.
You should be on Jim Rome, been on Oprah.
Jim Rome, it drive my mom crazy. She said, "You actually need to slow down." But if you're organized, have a system, I think you can do most things, if not many things.
Well, one of the things you made me go back to the music theme: Taylor Swift or Beyonce?
Oh, Beyonce, yeah. Yeah, you want to know one of the best concerts I've ever seen was, and I'm trying to think what All-Star game this was. I want to say it was the 2010 NBA All-Star game in LA. Whenever that All-Star game was in LA, she performed there, and that doesn't get enough credit. People don't talk about it. I mean,
she's from Houston, so I have an offense. Anybody from Houston, I gotta say, yeah. But when she performed there, I think she was already famous. I'm not saying she was, but it took her to a whole nother
it did
level. Yeah.
And also at I think it was Super Bowl 50, I was there too in San Francisco. Yeah. And that was outstanding. So yeah, she is never off. No. She's always on.
Yeah, and she knows how to get. I love her bit of old with Frankie Beverly and May. Some of the Isley brothers and paying tribute to her. Our heritage of growing up in the South, but also taking it forward so young people can hear it and understand, oh, okay, I know where that's coming from now. That's great. Well, you score on that one. We got to give you a touchdown on that one. That's great. It's been great having you on. Now I'm going to hold you to that now. When you are going to announce the next book, it's coming on the Chopping It Up with Buck show. Has to.
Well, you can have me on even before then.
Okay.
Because like I say, it's still work in progress, but anytime you want me to come back, I always tell people I'm always available for an opinion. So,
well, we're gonna have you back on with all the things going on at college football, pro football, everywhere. If you get a call or Kevin sends you an email, we touch base. We're gonna get you on right away.
Well, that sounds great. That sounds
great.
Good.
Great talking to you. It's great having on Terence Moore on the Chopping Up with Buck show. We'll be back next week.